Ronald the Rules Lawyer. Today I talk about the new legendary hero class, the Exemplar, and this includes a combat demonstration, one of the more spectacular ones I think, that also shows off how amazing Pathfinder 2e characters can be. This continues my coverage of the War of Immortals book, which includes mythic rules, which I covered in the last videos. The Exemplar is the quote-unquote mythic class. It's a non-mythic class that presumably is balanced to work side by side with non-mythic characters. But it reads and feels like someone who is larger than life. It evokes the same legends and folk tales of heroes who could wrestle gods and tricksters and people who could defy physics, but not using the mythic rules. The book describes them as possessing a divine spark and says that their power is more diluted. I'm excited to see the Exemplar in play. I recently watched part of a long video with critiques about D&D 5e. It's a very long video, I'll link to it in the description, but at around the 2-hour mark, they talk about the lack of variety and lack of choices for marshals in that system, where you just get to attack more times at higher levels, and that's what you do turn to turn. In Pathfinder, playing a marshal is a lot more fun. There are more choices and big moments. We see this in pre-existing classes, but the Exemplar, I think, exemplifies, pardon the pun, this more than any other martial class. It's also more complicated, and we'll see that in the combat demonstration because you're juggling different abilities. But it's oh so cinematic. And I'll also talk about the controversy right now that has stirred up a bit around the Exemplar archetype that other classes can take via a class feat. There's concern that it's too strong. Alright, so before we get into it, I'll introduce myself. I'm Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'm a lawyer who runs tabletop RPGs. For 7 years, I ran an after-school middle school RPG class. Support my Patreon. It allows me to continue making videos. I don't earn money as a lawyer. For more info, look at this video. And supporting my Patreon gives you ad-free early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. Alright, an overview of the Exemplar. The Exemplar has a divine spark. There could be a whole number of reasons why you have this spark. It could be accidental. Maybe you were touched by one of the drops of the god's rain. Maybe you were destined at birth. These origin stories are kind of the same as what we hear about mythic characters, so it is appropriately in this book. And look at this guy, he's fucking grinning. I don't know of any other iconic that has such a shit-eating grin. You are a martial class, and perhaps the most complex one in the game at that. You are juggling your divine spark between 3 legendary items called Ikons in your possession. Each has its own unique passive ability and an active ability. It reminds me of the Kineticist, both in its complexity, there's a wide variety of powers you can choose from, and also in its flavor. As it gets to higher and higher level, you'll see it becomes increasingly outlandish with long names for things and epic descriptions. So looking at the first page, we see it has typical martial stuff. Strength or dexterity as a key attribute, 10 hit points per level. Trained in martial weapons, trained in medium armor. Their mandatory skill is religion. Also, they're expert in fortitude and will saves, and actually their will save is what becomes legendary at quite an early level. This reflects their indomitability as legends. Also, it has the rare tag, the only class in the game to have this rarity, I believe. This reflects that you are someone with great power. And of course, this prompts getting permission from your GM to do that and having a conversation with them and your table. In fact, I would have appreciated more advice than I found in the book. Maybe there is somewhere that I didn't find on how to incorporate an Exemplar in a typical party or campaign. Last year, I was running Agents of Edgewatch, the fantasy law enforcement adventure path, and one of the players wanted to play the playtest Exemplar. They had a destiny, and when we talked about what would make them want to join the police force, we didn't really come up with a compelling reason. It's a conversation to have, but one I would imagine is not that difficult, at least not much more difficult than how to incorporate an evil character in a campaign. Alright, your main class feature is your icons, your 3 items you get at level 1. These are mundane, non-magical items. You definitely want one of them to be a weapon. That's figured into the balance of your class. You'll see why when we look at the weapon icons. They are classified into 3 groups: weapons, worn icons, and body icons. However, I believe it becomes a magical item once it becomes your icon, because it's clearly implied down here that all icons have the divine trait. You can apply armor and weapon runes to icons within reason. You can't make an icon both a weapon and armor, for example. There's at least one weapon icon that buffs your unarmed attacks. But you also can have runes benefit your unarmed attacks by applying them to body or worn icons. What if you want to change an icon? You can do so by spending a day of downtime. This can be a mundane item or a new magic item that you find, like a Cloak of Illusions. It just gets the icon abilities added to it. There appears to be no restriction on how often you can change your icons, so it's kind of like the Animist in that you have access potentially to a wide variety of abilities. However, your Divine Spark can only empower one of your icons at a time. Each of your 3 icons has a passive ability called its Imminence and an active ability. The way you transfer it, or at least one of the ways, is the action Shift Imminence. This you can only do once per round, and when you roll initiative, you can do this as a free action when you see what you're facing. But the other cooler way to transfer your spark between icons is to spark Transcendence. That's you using that icon's active ability to do something spectacular. The power of that act forces your spark out of that icon and immediately transfers to another one of yours. Like Shift Imminence, you can spark Transcendence only one time per round. Very important limitations, obviously. Another cool thing about how this class is structured is that class feats can expand the abilities of your icons. Like other martials, you get a class feat at level 1 and at every even level after. And some of those feats have the icon trait. You decide when you take the feat which of your icons that feat will buff. And you can have several icon feats that buff the same item. So you can have a single item have several passive abilities and several choices of Transcendence abilities that you can trigger when you spark Transcendence. By the way, I think it's an awkward phrase, spark Transcendence. I think tables should feel free to say transcend. The other first level class features are Humble Strikes. If you wield a simple weapon, you increase the damage die size by 1 step. This facilitates players who have a specific picture in their mind of what weapon their legendary hero is wielding, so that you're not held back by the fact that, say, a spear, a very classic heroic weapon, is only a simple weapon. You also get the Shield Block feat, which of course facilitates other classic myths. Alright, what happens when you advance? First, I'll say that you get the usual martial stuff. You become an expert in strikes at 5th level and a master at 13th level. Your defense goes up to expert at level 13 and master at level 19. You get increases in damage at certain levels. Those are the weapon specialization features. However, that bonus damage is not weapon damage, it's spirit damage for you. Reflecting how you are larger than life, I suppose. You can stab ghosts in the heart after all. I'll mention here that there is a level 1 exemplar feat that lets you be sanctified, making your spirit damage holy or unholy. You get to sign up for the holy war, basically. Also notable is that your will saves are amazing. They become master at level 7 and legendary at level 13, which is very early, with the corresponding changes to degrees of success and taking damage. As a legendary hero, your mind is steel. You will not be turned around. At level 9, your class DC becomes expert, which powers a lot of your icon abilities. But the most important part of your advancement is this. You get an epithet, a word or phrase that gets added to your name as your legend grows. These give you new powers and abilities and let you accomplish more things on your turn. At level 3, you get a root epithet, and these are single words. It gives you a skill and a special ability that triggers whenever you spark Transcendence on one of your icons. So when you do something spectacular with an icon, you can do this additional thing afterward, and it resolves after you fully resolve the Transcendence ability. There's a sidebar suggesting, and I think every table should do this, talking to your GM to come up with moments in the story when your exemplar earns its moniker. There are 6 to choose from, and I'm not going to show all of them. I'm going to focus on the icons in this video, which is already going to be long, and the icons are the meat of the class. But here's an example, the Proud. When you spark Transcendence, you boast to an enemy within 30 feet to draw its attention. Until the start of your next turn, they have a penalty attacking your allies and doing damage to them, and get bonuses against you. You don't have to do this. It says that you can do this when you spark Transcendence. but something obviously that helps if you are more of a tank and want to protect a vulnerable person in the party. At level 7, you get a Dominion epithet, and your name gets longer, and the names of each of these epithets gets longer too. You get a bunch of stuff here. First, you get the level 1 Energized Spark feat, which gives you the option of the spirit damage coming from your powers being a specific kind of other damage instead. You also get a critical specialization effect when you critically hit foes. By the way, if you have a critical specialization from another source, this gives you another option of what to do when you critically hit. And you get a second option for that bonus thing that happens when you spark Transcendence. You can only do one epithet ability for each time you spark Transcendence. Here's one example, whose cry is thunder, so you can be Mahoa the Proud, whose cry is thunder at level 7. And when you critically hit, you make a thunderclap that forces that foe to do a fortitude saving throw or become knocked prone and deafened for 1 minute. Your new option when you spark Transcendence now is to electrically charge yourself so that any unarmed strikes against you or attack from a non-reach melee weapon deals electricity damage to them. At level 15, you get a Sovereignty epithet. You get a third option of what to do when you spark Transcendence. One example is Healer of the World. When you spark Transcendence, you can choose any number of willing or unconscious creatures within 30 feet, including possibly yourself. If they're not dying, they get 10 temporary hit points until the start of your next turn. If they're dying, they stabilize. I'm also going to show on the screen Thief of Moonlight, which I thought was meh. Your Transcendence ability is to palm an object or steal an item from an enemy within 30 feet. But the rules for stealing mean that you cannot take items that are wielded by a foe. There's a level 15 skill feat, Legendary Thief, that lets you take something that's wielded with 1 minute. So either this completely invalidates that, or it does nothing really useful in the typical fight. Maybe if you want to take a wand that's in a mage's pocket, but it's probably low priority for them if they're not wielding it. I don't know. All right, let's get to the icons, the meat of the class. There are 21 of them, which is a lot, so I'm going to try to go through them relatively quickly. This video has already been long, and I have limited time this week. It's been a busy week making these videos. By the way, I'll flag for now that the concern about the exemplar archetype being too strong is that with the dedication feat, you get the full abilities of one of these icons. So keep that in mind when we go through them, and I'll try to address this concern towards the end. These 21 icons are listed alphabetically, which is a decision I don't like at all. I'm going to instead present them by category in this video. First, I'm going to cover the ones that are melee weapons. I'll note that all of the melee weapons have an Imminence, a passive ability that adds spirit damage, the typical one being 2 additional spirit damage per weapon damage die. Remember, you can already add spirit damage to your strikes as you level up. This is in addition to that. Barrow's Edge must be a slashing or piercing weapon, and I have to think that this name is a call-out to Craven Edge in Critical Role. It's a weapon that thirsts for violence and life force. It only does 1 additional spirit damage, but that increases to 3 when someone you strike is below half health. Their active ability drinks life force and heals you. The Gleaming Blade must be applied to a sword or knife weapon, or to a melee unarmed attack that is slashing. Your active ability is essentially the fighter's double slice feat. You get to attack twice and take possibly no multiple attack penalty on the second attack. And you're not dual wielding here, this is with the same weapon. Hands of the Wildling is for attacking with your hands, your unarmed strikes, or with a gauntlet. Its passive is that you do spirit splash damage, and its active is to slash at foes in an area in front of you, a cone, and it does spirit damage. You can make yourself off guard for a round to make it more effective. Mortal Harvest must be a sickle or an axe, flail, or pole arm, and it does persistent spirit damage, and if you strike a foe, you can walk up to half your speed and attack another at the same accuracy as your previous strike. Noble Branch must be a staff or spear or polearm. It can automatically do modest spirit damage to a foe that you just struck. Titan's Breaker must be a club, hammer, or axe, or a melee unarmed attack that is bludgeoning. This can even do spirit damage to objects and constructs. It can also do a super strike called Fracture Mountains that does additional spirit damage and adds damage dice. There's one weapon icon for thrown weapons called Shadow Sheath. This lets you draw and throw a thrown weapon with a single action. And you're actually drawing a replica of the item, and it has all of the runes on that item, which might be the only way in the game, I'm not sure, that fixes that problem that thrown weapon builds have, where you might only be able to afford so many runes for 1 or 2 weapons. It also has a cool ability where if you miss, you can be like, just kidding, that was my distraction. Here's the real attack, and they are off guard to your next attack, which is also done with the same attack bonus. The next two are ranged weapon icons. First is Star Shot. This lets you do a small area attack that does spirit damage. The next one is Unfailing Bow. It has strong critical hits, and it can, if you do an attack and like the d20 roll, you get to make a follow-up attack using that same d20 roll. Those are the weapon icons. There is a shield icon, classified as a worn icon, called Mirrored Aegis. This can protect you and nearby allies against attack, and if it's damaged, it can heal itself outside of combat. You can also make it boost several defenses for you and one of your allies, nearby allies, for 1 minute. Next we get to the body icons. These are aspects of your body that are legendary. Here is Eye-Catching Spot. It is a fetching beauty spot under an eye, or maybe a smile. You make it harder for enemies to attack you in melee, and you can also fascinate a creature, a stronger version of fascination that does not end when you attack their allies. You're just like, look at my mythic mole. Gaze as Sharp as Steel enhances your perception and lets you perceive and dodge ranged attacks. You can also pause a moment to add precision damage to the next time you strike a foe successfully, before the end of your next turn. Scar of the Survivor boosts your fortitude saves and gives you the Die Hard feat. You can also heal yourself with this icon. Skin Hard as Horn gives you resistance to one of the 3 common types of physical damage, but not when it's a critical hit. You can power it up to increase your resistance, and if you fully block the damage from a blow, cause it to reverberate back onto the attacker, debuffing their attacks and making them off guard until their next turn starts. The last group are the worn icons. The first is Bands of Imprisonment. This boosts your will saves and mental resistance. You also can spend 2 actions to do a lot of things at once. Escape with a bonus, walk twice your speed in a straight line, and make a melee strike. You don't have to do all the things on that list when you do this. Fetching Bangles makes it hard for enemies to get away from you. They have to do a saving throw, and you can also actively yank them towards you. The Horn of Plenty cannot be opened by anyone else. Every day it makes 1 or more elixirs of life, and you can draw and drink from it with a single action. You can even drink something and have it affect an ally within 60 feet, even dividing up heal points if you want. The Pelt of the Beast gives you resistance to 1 type of damage from this list and protects you from extreme weather. You can also give resistance and bonuses against the chosen type to your allies. Skybearer's Belt improves your athletics skill actions, gives you a bonus, and you can also walk and pick up an ally and drop them off somewhere while you walk. Thousand League Sandals gives you a status bonus to your speed and also lets you prompt allies to move during your turn. Victor's Wreath inspires you and nearby allies to make more accurate attacks, and you can prompt all allies within your 15-foot aura to make a saving throw against an effect. It's not limited to conditions, just any effect that they don't want, and even effects that normally don't allow a saving throw. The next thing to cover would be the feats, and I want to save them for last after the combat demo because some of them are quite dramatic. I want to end on a high. Let's now look at a level 10 exemplar in action in a combat demonstration. Rondo the Brave, born of the bones of the earth, or at least that's what he'll come to be known as. His legend has not yet been born, and we're about to see the moment it was. He's being punished for committing some crime he didn't commit, of course. So for the entertainment of bored, restive crowds, he's being made to fight impossible enemies. A headless horseman, a hobgoblin general, and a zombie Hulk. All the enemies reveal themselves at once to a roar of the crowd, and they roll initiative. When rolling initiative, Rondo gets to shift his imminence to any of his 3 icons at this time. He puts his Divine Spark in his trusty Earthbreaker, a massive hammer that has a spike as well. The Hobgoblin also for free at this time can try to demoralize Rondo and does an intimidation check. 27 will not succeed against Rondo the Brave because he is a master in will saves already by this level. He's level 10. Rondo wins initiative, but he is going to delay. He's going to stand there ready to act. He's waiting for the enemies to come to him. This is often something you want to do in Pathfinder since movement costs an action. Not always recommended, however. The Dullahan also delays at this time, waiting for something else to happen. The Hobgoblin General strides forward with his glaive. He swings at Rondo with a wide arc, and Rondo dodges it at the last moment. The Dullahan sees its chance and now rides in confidently, knowing that it can now flank with the aid of Hobgoblin General. It swings its keen longsword. That's a miss, and this is a hit. Slicing Rondo due to flanking, 12 damage. The giant zombie is slowed, as zombies are in Pathfinder. It has only 2 actions per turn, but it hits hard. It walks up bearing a hunk of meat right here and has a 15-foot reach and tries to hit Rondo with it. Slam. And that misses. Rondo the Brave jumps into initiative, and he opens with Flow of War. It's a level 6 exemplar feat that lets him, as a free action, basically give himself the effect of the haste spell. He is now quickened, and his extra action can be used to stride or strike. This is something he can do once per hour. Future Ronald here. I'm realizing after recording and planning that entire combat demonstration that Flow of War only works for 1 turn. So this entire combat demonstration, imagine that Rondo drank a potion of quickness at the start of battle. Lawyers make mistakes too. His spark is in his Earthbreaker. His Earthbreaker is the icon Titan's Breaker. It does +2 spirit damage per damage die, so +4 spirit damage because it has a striking rune. Rondo opens by attacking the horse, and that is in fact an easy critical hit. This horse is actually much weaker. At level 7, he started getting +2 spirit damage to all of his strikes, but his spark and his Earthbreaker adds 4 more to that. And this all doubles on a critical hit. It will do 60 damage, and the horse had only 51. So it's clearly dying. But he also has the level 7 epithet, Born of the Bones of the Earth. When he critically hits with a strike and they're touching the ground, he slams them into the ground and they're immobilized and have to spend an action to escape it, if they were alive. Also, he has a shock rune on his Earthbreaker, so the electricity damage arcs to the Dullahan, 12 damage. This GM asks for a reflex save from the Dullahan to see if he lands on his feet when his mount dies. It succeeds and lands randomly right here. Unfortunately for it, because Rondo the Brave is about to spark Transcendence in his Earthbreaker. Now he has 2 choices. Now he can use its base ability, or he can use the ability he gained from a feat. At level 4, he took Steel on Steel, which he assigned to the Earthbreaker. With it, he can do a Ringing Challenge, 2 actions to do spirit and sonic damage in a 15-foot radius, and possibly deafen a foe. And it does 8d4, an average of 20 damage at this level. But he's not going to do that. He's going to use his icon's base ability, called Fracture Mountains. He spends 2 actions to do a Mega Strike against the Dullahan. This will force the spark to move to another icon. He attacks with the multiple attack penalty, so a +16, and that is a hit. Fracture Mountains increases the bonus spirit damage from this icon from 2 per weapon damage die to 6. And on top of this, Fracture Mountains adds 2 weapon damage dice. Alright, so this is 40 plus 10 more. That's 50 damage to the Dullahan. And I forgot he is Sanctified. He has the level 1 feat Sanctified Soul, adding the holy trait to his spirit damage. It has a weakness of 5, so it takes 5 more damage, a total of 55 damage from this Mega Strike. His spark is forced out of the Earthbreaker, and he's going to change it to his Fetching Bangles. These are bracers that make it harder for enemies to get away. He grins, now fully confident. However, because he has the Epithet class feature, he can do something in addition when he sparks Transcendence. He gets to do an Epithet ability after resolving the Transcendence. Because he is Rondo the Brave, or will be known as Rondo the Brave, he can stride up to half of his speed to a foe. Or what he's about to do. He is Born of the Bones of the Earth. He shatters the surface of the ground in a 10-foot emanation, making it difficult terrain, only for other people, not for himself. He still has an action left. He is going to stride right here. You'll see why it's a good idea soon. We now enter round 2, and the Hobgoblin General wants to get in a flanking position and wants to get right here. He has a 25-foot speed, so he can only get this far in the difficult terrain. With the second stride, he would get farther away from Rondo. However, Rondo's spark is now in his fetching bangles. It must make a will saving throw against his class DC, which is 29 right now. And that fails, so it disrupts his move action, he loses the action, and he has only one action left. He's going to strike at Rando without the advantage of flanking, and that misses. Next is the Dullahan. It has fast healing and gains 5 health. It doesn't like standing next to Rondo, understandably. It wants to withdraw from melee for the moment and maybe switch to its returning hatchet. It has a ability to make thrown weapons returnable in its hands. He tries to move down here. However, because of the fetching bangles, he has to make a will saving throw at this time. The bangles' passive ability does not require an action, and that succeeds. So it moves here. With its 20-foot speed and the difficult terrain here, this is as far as it can go. It then swaps from its longsword to its hatchet, and then makes an attack against Rondo from here. And that's a miss. Next is the Zombie Hulk. Because Rondo moved up here, it's now out of the Zombie Hulk's 15-foot reach. So it moves up here and then tries to strike Rondo. And that hunk of meat hits. 23 damage. It has only 2 actions. Now it's Rondo. And Rondo is going to spark Transcendence, this time with his fetching bangles. He gets to yank a enemy that's up to 20 feet away, adjacent to himself. He gets a will save and succeeds. He moves his Divine Spark back to his Earthbreaker. However, he's not done, because remember, he has Epithets. His Brave Epithet, remember, lets him move half of his speed, which is 30 feet, so he can move 15 feet towards the Dullahan as a free action. And he gets to ignore the difficult terrain he just created. His Earthbreaker now has its bonus damage again. He would like to do Fracture Mountains now, but you can only spark Transcendence once per round. He has 3 actions left. He's going to strike at the Dullahan. That's a hit. 24 damage. And it has weakness to his holy damage, so that's 29 damage. He then wants to move away and put some distance between himself and this zombie. He's going to move right here. Last thing he does is he shifts Imminence back to his bangles. The Hobgoblin's next. It goes here and attacks with its glaive. Miss, and that's a hit. 16 damage. The Dullahan fast heals 5, moves up here, and attacks with its hatchet. And hits and misses. 17 damage. The Zombie Hulk moves closer and tries to hit, and misses. Rondo is about to do something spectacular, and it has nothing to do with his icons. It's from a feat called Raise Island. He spends 3 actions. He's going to churn the ground to reposition foes and raise a mini island. All enemies within 30 feet need to make a Fortitude save. His class DC is 29. The Hobgoblin General fails, so is drawn closer to Rondo the Brave, born of the bones of the earth, and also is off guard until the start of Rondo's next turn. The Dullahan also fails and is drawn closer. The Zombie Hulk also fails and is pushed 10 feet farther away. You can sweep a foe up to 15 feet to another location within this 30-foot emanation. And because Rondo's on a surface, he raises a mini island around himself. In a 5-foot emanation, the earth rises 10 feet up, lifting everyone and everything with it. He then, as part of this, gets to make a melee strike for free, and he's naturally going to go after the Dullahan, who has just been made off guard by this. And, oh, that's a miss. However, he is hasted, and this hits. And that likely will kill. Triggering its weakness to holy damage, 25 damage will kill the Dullahan. There's a roar from the crowd. We now enter round 4, and this Hobgoblin is quite intimidated by Rondo right now. It's going to attack with its glaive and hit 14 damage. And then it's going to GTFO and leap off this pillar. It does not want to be next to Rondo. Falling 10 feet deals 1/2 of that distance in bludgeoning damage. It uses its last action to stand up. The Zombie Hulk spends its entire turn just trying to get closer. It moves over here. Rondo is next. Well, remember when he shifted Imminence to his Bangles? He's now going to activate its ability and try to yank the Hobgoblin that just tried to get away back up onto the pillar. The Hobgoblin General must make a will saving throw and beat a 29, and that will fail. It's yanked right back up to where it was. Rondo moves his spark to a third icon. Because he just sparked Transcendence, he uses his Epithet ability to smash difficult terrain around himself in a 10-foot emanation, which I will say only goes as far as the width of the island. He strides here to get a little farther from the zombie, and then he's going to swap weapons from his Earthbreaker to his third icon, which is a hatchet. It is the Barrow's Edge, which he wants to switch to because it does slashing damage, which is really good against this zombie, and for other reasons. He then uses the level 1 feat Twin Stars to make a magical duplicate of the hatchet. He's now dual-wielding hatchets that both have its runes and special icon abilities. Round 5. The Hobgoblin is shook and is going to do the exact same thing it did last turn. This misses, and then it leaps off, takes 5 damage, and then stands up. The Zombie Hulk tries to attack Rondo, however, this GM's going to rule that because it's a 10-foot elevation, the zombie's not going to be able to strike from here. It wastes its first action. It then moves over here with its second action. Tries to get a better spot. Rondo then moves over, it's going to stride off the pillar that he just made. He does not take fall damage because he has the Catfall skill feat. He gets to ignore 10 feet of a fall. So he lands on his feet. He then does the feint action to try to catch the Hobgoblin off guard. 24 succeeds against its perception DC of 23, so it is now off guard. And then he swings with one of his hatchets. It is the Barrow's Edge, and its passive ability is to do +1 spirit damage per weapon damage die. And this is a critical hit. Everything doubles on a crit, and this will do 36 damage. It also has the wounding rune, so it causes the Hobgoblin to suffer persistent bleed damage, which is doubled because of the crit, so 2d6 persistent bleed damage at the end of each of its turns. We're now going to see the other reason why he switched to his hatchet. He could have used his Earthbreaker against the Hobgoblin, and in fact would have done more damage. But now with his fourth action, he's going to spark Transcendence, the Barrow Edge's base Transcendence ability. When he does a successful strike against a foe, he can spend an action, and he heals himself 1/2 of the damage he just dealt. He did 36 damage, so he heals himself 18. He is now in better shape than the Hobgoblin. By the way, I don't know if this would work against the zombie. It's a vitality effect, but it says in the text that your blade absorbs the foe's vitality. I think it's not supposed to work. He moves his Divine Spark to his Bangles, so it's going to be especially hard for this Hobgoblin to try to get away now. He also has his Epithets, and he chooses to smash the ground again and make difficult terrain in a 10-foot emanation. By the way, all of these areas are permanent. There's no duration listed. These are permanent alterations to the ground. Round 6. The Hobgoblin is going to try to escape. It uses its athletics skill and succeeds. So it's free to move now. However, Escape had the attack trait, so he now suffers from the multiple attack penalty. He's going to stride here and swing with his glaive with the multiple attack penalty. And that's a miss. And it misses because of the multiple attack penalty. He suffers 2d6 bleed damage, 10 damage, and succeeds at ending the persistent damage. The Zombie Hulk wails away with its hunk of meat. That sounded kind of dirty. And hits, for little damage, and misses. Rondo, first thing he does is shifts Imminence from his Bangles back to his hatchets, because he wants to spark Transcendence with it again. But he's going to do something different this time, because he took a feat that adds abilities to this icon. It's called Mated Birds in Paired Flight. It gives another passive ability that stacks with its usual, giving the returning property to both of his hatchets. He can throw them and they return back. Basically, he gets to throw both hatchets, and they're both attracted to each other, being mated birds. It has to be within their first range increment, which is 10 feet, which works here. The hatchets are thrown, and they reunite at the point where the enemy is, and they both consider the enemy flanked because they're both attacking it from opposite sides. Both of these attacks happen at the same accuracy, so without the multiple attack penalty. It's off guard, so it's an AC of 23, while he has a plus 19 to attack. That's a critical hit. The second one is a regular hit. He only needed to roll a 14 to critically hit. By the way, in case you're wondering, this is a level 6 Hobgoblin, so several levels below our superhero. Crits can happen a lot in Pathfinder. Also, because both attacks land, they do an extra damage die. So after rolling the damage for these, add another d6. Because the Hobgoblin's below half health and Barrow's Edge is hungry, they each do plus 6 spirit damage before doubling on the crit. So we'll see what that adds up to. The crit will do 40 damage. The regular hit will do 18 damage. And the feat adds another weapon damage die, 1d6. Alright, so that's 60 damage to the Hobgoblin General. That kills the Hobgoblin. Also, by the way, he immobilizes foes that he critically hits, which kind of doesn't make sense here with a ranged attack. I'm wondering if there should be language there limiting it to melee strikes. So the Hobgoblin dies. This spectacle drives the crowd into a frenzy. He shifts his Divine Spark to his bangles, because whatever, he's not trying to keep the zombie close, but it's the other icon that is immediately available. In fact, he hopes to kite the zombie and take advantage of its slowness and use the difficult terrain he's making to his advantage. And he can attack from range with his hatchets, with slashing damage. Also remember, he just sparked Transcendence. He could slam more difficult terrain around himself or stride towards the zombie. He's going to do neither in this case. Mated Birds Impaired Flight took 2 actions, so he has spent 3 actions so far. He's going to use his extra action to stride up these stairs. He goes right here with his 30-foot movement speed. Round 7. The zombie does not need to go up to Rondo the Brave to attack him. He's going to pick up the Dualahan from the ground as his first action, and then throw the corpse at Rondo, which is actually in the stat block. Yes, it is. And this hits 20 damage. Rondo's up, and he realizes this is not going to be as easy as he thought. There's a lot of heft in that thrown body. In fact, the zombie has a range increment of 30 feet throwing corpses. He would love to shift Imminence and throw 2 hatchets at the zombie Hulk. However, it only works within the first range increment. He'd have to be down here. And that would use all 4 actions and leave him next to the zombie. He's just going to shift Imminence to his hatchets and prepare to do that in a later turn. Next, he attacks with first hatchet, and it has a -2 range penalty. However, zombies are not very agile. It has an AC of only 21. It hit, was almost a crit, and it does what looks like 18 damage, but it actually is going to be 28 damage because it has weakness 10 to slashing damage. It attacks with the other hatchet, which is an agile weapon, so smaller multiple attack penalty. That hits. The distance prevented another crit. And he attacks again, now with a +9 attack bonus, and that hits too, doing 24 damage. The zombie moves forward and tries to hit, and misses. Rhonda moves down and now sparks Transcendence, attacking with both hatchets against a flanked zombie Hulk. Its AC is only 19 now. He just needs to roll a natural 10 or higher to crit with either one of these hatchets. That's a critical hit, and the second one is another critical hit. First one does 38 damage, and the second one triggers its weakness to slashing also. These are both resolved normally. They're separate attacks, unlike some similar feats. And this one does 27 damage. He shifts his Divine Spark to his bangles, and then he creates difficult terrain around himself, and then he uses his 4th action to get away. This fight looks like it's in the bag, and the crowd is now on its feet, cheering for Rondo the Brave, born of the bones of the earth. So from that fight, I hope it became apparent what I meant by kineticist-like abilities. You're a martial class, however, you do things that are quite visually spectacular and affect the world around you. You do indeed defy the laws of physics and have a spark of the power of a god in you. We also saw the tension between your icons. It was like you were changing fighting stances mid-battle. When his Earthbreaker had his spark, he could hit hard. When his Bangles had his spark, he was able to prevent enemies from getting away from him. When his hatchet had a spark, he was able to heal himself and do some other tricks. Also, the bangles and their usefulness were not quite on full display here because normally you're in a group of party members. Being able to draw enemies to you protects more vulnerable allies. All right, let's finally get onto the feats. And I saved these for last because as we get to higher level, you'll see that these get increasingly legendary and ridiculous. Because of time, mine, and yours, I'm focusing more on feats that were not already demonstrated in the combat demo. Also, this is not an exhaustive walkthrough. I focused on the feats that stood out to me. Also, when I go through these, keep in mind that all of the icon feats with the icon trait are ways to enhance your icons and add abilities to them. All right, at level 1, there's a pair of feats that I thought were important to point out. Sanctified Soul that Rondo the Brave had lets you be holy or unholy. There's another level 1 feat called Vow of Mortal Defiance, which requires that you not be sanctified as either. It lets you vow to defeat a creature within 60 feet that has the holy or unholy trait. When you deal damage to it, you deal an additional 1d6 spirit damage, and this is true the first time you damage it every round. So if you have a campaign with a lot of unholy enemies, this is also useful, but this doesn't require you to sanctify. The level 2 feat, Hurl at the Horizon, gives another passive ability to an icon, gives it the Thrown 15 feet trait, or increases its current increment by 10 feet. This opens up ranged attacking with weapons that normally you can't throw. The level 4 feat, Through the Needle's Eye, can be used on any weapon icon. It adds a Transcendence ability called Blinding of the Needle. You make a superficial cut above an enemy's eye. You make a strike and resolve as normal, but they must make a fortitude save, and if they fail, they're blinded for 1 round. They can get rid of it with an interact action. The next feat is Flow of War. Once per hour, you can, as a free action, give yourself a bonus action on that turn to strike or stride. It can be very useful in clutch moments. Also not pictured is Reactive Strike, a level 6 feat that exemplars can take. Next is the level 8 feat with the dramatic name Rejoice in Solstice Storm. It's limited to 2 of the epithets that you can gain at level 7. You hold your arms out, and the fury of the seasons comes to your jubilant embrace as a storm spirals out of you. It's a 30-foot emanation, but it's in 4 non-overlapping cones, each representing a season: winter, spring, summer, and fall, in that order going clockwise. Each has a different damage type, and each imposes a different debuff when creatures critically fail. It affects allies too, so be careful. Next is the level 14 feat, Infinite Blades Celestial Arrow. You get to add this to a ranged weapon icon and give it a new passive ability. You shoot duplicate missiles affecting 2 foes adjacent to your target, doing modest spirit damage. Its Transcendence ability is pretty amazing. It's called Heaven Reigns an Ending. You shoot an arrow that multiplies into a dense cloud of weapons. You do a ranged strike with a -2 penalty against every enemy you're aware of within a cone as long as your weapon's range increment. So with a longbow, that's a 100-foot cone, and you can attack every single enemy in it. You roll 1 attack roll and 1 damage roll, however, and all of the strike's damage is spirit damage. Next is another level 14 feat, Complete the Hero's Journey. If within the last 10 minutes you have imbued your spark in all 3 of your icons, then you can spark Transcendence on your current icon, but instead of its normal effect, you do a 3-action harm or heal spell at maximum rank. There's no limit on how often you can do this per day. It has to be once every 10 minutes, however, so this can do healing outside of combat, but you can also use it within combat. It is limited, however, to the 3-action version that affects an emanation. Next is Shroud of Ghosts. You imbue a worn icon with this and give it this Transcendence ability called Skirt the Underworld. You basically become a ghost for a round. You become invisible and fly up to your speed, and every enemy that you fly past must do a fortitude save or become blinded for a whole minute. If they critically fail, it becomes permanent. This has the incapacitation trait, importantly. For each creature you blinded, you get an extra round of invisibility. Undead and creatures with strong ties to the world of the dead are immune to this. Next is the feat that inspired the thumbnail, Sunwrecker. It's a level 18 feat. You can put this into any weapon icon, no limitation. Its passive ability is that any successful critical hit you make, You can cast a second rank darkness spell centered on the target of the attack. Well, at this level, many foes have dark vision, or have ways to counteract such a low rank effect. There are also foes that don't have dark vision, and its Transcendence ability is amazing. It's called Break the Sun's Leg. You make a slashing motion over the brightest source of light available, whether it's a torch in the room or the sun in the sky. A gash appears over it, whatever it is, visible to all, and devours the light. The entire area within a 120-foot burst around you is affected by a 9th rank darkness spell for 1 minute. And at that rank, it's a more powerful kind of darkness that foils dark vision. Even if you're a dwarf with regular dark vision, at least, all creatures are concealed to you. You need to have greater dark vision to have no problems in this high rank darkness spell in this huge area. Additionally, the stolen light is channeled to your eyes. I'd have this image of your eyes gleaming, granting you greater dark vision for the duration of the effect, which is 1 minute. By the way, there are some feats I did not talk about yet that I'm saving for the super weapon I will show at the end of the video. Next are the level 20 feats. Cutting without blade. Basically, it's written here that divine icons are no longer necessary and they disintegrate into golden light. I'm not going to take that literally. I think you still have your icons here. It implies that later in the paragraph. But the point of this feat is ultimate versatility and accessibility for all of your icon feats. All of your icon feats apply to all of your icons and also to anything you pick up like a blade of grass. So what this effectively means is that all of your icon feats that give you a passive effect, all of those passive effects are now constantly active. You're making muffins again on my bare thigh. I don't know what to do with her. Ow. Okay, just sit, please. Also, every morning you can learn an icon feat of 16th level or lower, and you get it temporarily for that day. Okay, as I read this further, you can turn a blade of grass into a fully functional copy of your icon immediately before or after striking with it. So if you have more than one weapon icon, it looks like you can choose with each strike at the moment you strike which of your weapon icons you're attacking with. So all of this, I think, is a fancy way of saying you have access to all of your icons' special abilities at all times without having to shift imminence and worry about where your spark is. You're still limited to 1 spark transcendence per round. Next is Remake the World. You basically can, once per day, replicate the effects of a divine spell of 8th rank or lower. And this does not count as casting a spell. It cannot be dispelled or counteracted. You are basically doing incredible things that match high rank divine spells through your godly power. We're talking about spells like Sunburst, doing fire damage in a huge area, or assuming an angel form. You have almost the entire divine spell list at your disposal that you can use once per day. So this is the being a god on earth feat. You kind of outrank Jesus. I doubt he had more than 1 encounter per adventuring day. Alright, onto the archetype and the controversy around it. It, I would say, is objectively stronger than any other archetype in the game, at least in its dedication feat, which gives you the full benefit of 1 icon. You get its passive ability, you get to use its spark transcendence ability. It's just that because you don't have another icon for your spark to move on to, your spark just goes into yourself, and you have to shift imminence as an action to restore the spark in it. Just really quickly, it has a lot of the typical feats that give you access to the class's class feats, a feat to give you more hit points, and at level 12, a way to get a second icon. As we saw with the icons, they are quite strong, very strong, above the curve as second level abilities, which this dedication feat is. I'm also going to link to a video by Bad Luck Gamer which covers this same issue. Also, I don't see anything ruling out being able to, like an exemplar, find another icon that you can spend a day of downtime to put your spark into. If a table reads it that way, you have access to all 21 icons given enough downtime. This is a gray area, and I would suggest not allowing that at a table. Let's just compare the weapon icon Gleaming Blade to the Barbarian Dedication feat. Gleaming Blade gives you a flat +2 spirit damage per weapon damage die to every strike you make as its passive bonus. The Barbarian Rage action lets you enter a state where you get +2 damage that does not scale as you get to higher level, and a -1 armor class penalty, and you cannot do concentrate actions while raging, and it costs an action to enter it. And you're bound by the Barbarian Instinct's Anathema. Gleaming Blade additionally gives you the Transcendence ability to have what's effectively the very popular and strong level 1 fighter feat, Double Slice. You can make 2 attacks with a weapon, and the second attack does not have the multiple attack penalty, if it is an agile weapon. Otherwise, it has a -2 penalty, which is still great. In this respect, it's just like Double Slice for the fighter feat, but it's better because you don't have to be dual wielding to use this. It could be a single big two-hander. Now, if you do that Transcendence ability, you do have to spend an action to get your spark back into the weapon. But it remains an option for you on top of the stronger passive ability that Gleaming Blade gives compared to Rage. Another icon that we saw was Shadow Sheath, which allows them to magically replicate a single thrown weapon so that they can spam that weapon with all of its runes over and over again. They don't have to devote a slot to the returning rune. There's a post on the Pathfinder subreddit that brings up this issue, and I largely agree with it, and I'll link to it in the video description. But the top voted comment there brought up that the issue here is that this archetype is very front-loaded. You get the full effect of at least part of a key class feature of Exemplar at 2nd level, whereas the Barbarian archetype gives you your Barbarian Instinct benefit at level 6. The Rogue archetype requires you take a level 4 feat to get sneak attack damage, which doesn't become a full 1d6 until level 6, which is still a fraction of what sneak attack can eventually do for a higher level Rogue. The Monk's Flurry of Blows ability is gated to a level 10 Monk archetype feat that also has a cooldown of 1 to 4 rounds. So I agree that this archetype is more powerful than the other archetypes. Thankfully, the Exemplar has the rare tag. It's not stated here in the archetype, but everyone should treat it as rare. Not only for thematic reasons, but also because of the strength of this archetype. Now, rarity should not denote higher power. Pathfinder is a game that is balanced so that all options of a similar level are supposed to be of similar power. But here is an instance where it is a fact that it is more powerful than other options. When a GM makes a consideration of whether to allow this rare option, they should think about this. Now, if Paizo erratas this, I would welcome it. I do think this archetype opens up an opportunity or gives me an idea that I'll share in final thoughts. All right, final thoughts. There's been a complaint in the D&D space, not just 5th edition either, but other editions that are not 4th edition, that casters eventually, when you get to higher levels, are godlike, while fighters and other martials are just kind of regular people. They're restricted to the mundane, and bending the laws of reality are the exclusive domain of spellcasting. And to folks who have that concern, I say show them Pathfinder's Exemplar, which says fuck that. Some people say that Pathfinder's Fighter is the strongest martial class because of its effective +2 to attack and some of its feats, and I would say au contraire. There's more to martial combat than big number. And I think the combat demo showed that. The epithets you get as you level up improve your action economy. You get to do free, amazing things every time you spark Transcendence. And also, when you do a critical hit, they give you particularly strong critical specialization effects. And they also give you extra damage types to sub in for your spirit damage, giving you more versatility. It just feels like you can do plenty on your turn, barring the fact that I made a mistake during the combat demonstration and gave myself an extra action every turn, which is still possible at level 10 with a potion of quickness, or having an ally who casts haste on you. There is, however, a complexity issue, which I think was apparent also in the combat video. There are some of you watching who may have had a combination of WoW and also this is a lot to juggle. It's similar to the Animist in that regard in my recent video. You get a set of tool sets that you can switch between at different times. It's like you have stances that you can enter. Each icon has a passive ability and an active ability that you trigger that causes you to put your spark into another one. And icons can have more than one passive and more than one active ability from feats. Not only do you need to remember which abilities you have right now, but you also want to think ahead as to where you want your spark to go next when you spark Transcendence. What will you be doing next turn? And what will your Transcendence effect be next turn? But I would say the Exemplar is a success in making you feel epic and larger than life. It would be interesting to see an Exemplar get mythic power in the mythic rules and get an epic destiny, particularly the Eternal Legend mythic destiny, which seems made for it. And speaking of mythic, I think that tables who want a mythic campaign but have issues with this or that part of the mythic rules, or just want to introduce a dash of mythic into their campaign, I think that Exemplar archetype gives an idea of how you can make your campaign feel more mythic by allowing people to have an icon. Icons are super thematic and can have backstories tied to them connected to your character's history or future. And this could be a great thing that characters can get, maybe not even by taking the feat, but from something happening in the story. It certainly strikes me as more interesting than simply having mythic points that you can spend to get +8 on your roll. So I think there was a missed opportunity here to make icons more available as part of the mythic experience, at least as an official variant. But anyway, I'm putting it out there. I think icons also show Pathfinder doing magic items right. And I think it's one of the really valid criticisms of Pathfinder 2e that it's so balanced that magic items, which all have levels assigned to them, if you stick within the tables saying when you reward magic items at certain levels, magic items are less spectacular and awe-inspiring than they are in D&D 5th edition and even 1st edition Pathfinder. Some magical boots might give you +1 to acrobatics checks, for example. And so a lot of them have abilities you activate to give some more flavor to what's kind of a little dry, to be honest. But these icons are more powerful than a lot of those magic items. And they're so thematic. They don't have to be weapons. They can be things you wear, a bauble, your hair, like in the Samson legend. You're not powerful simply because you have great magic items. These icons are imbued with the power of you. They are things that only you can wield, or a great hero can wield. And this goes back to many classic tales like The Sword in the Stone, or Thor's Hammer, Mjolnir. And unlike magic items, almost all magic items in Pathfinder and D&D, these icons are far more customizable because you can add powers to them through your feats. So I want to end with a super weapon, and this will include some feats I've not talked about yet. Now, I hate to pick on the world's greatest role-playing game. Actually, I'm lying. I kind of enjoy it. But D&D has a very rare magic item called the Sword of Sharpness. And what does it do? When you roll a natural 20 when you attack, you do +14 slashing damage, and you get to roll a d20 again. If it's another nat 20, you lop off one of their limbs. And that's it. And this is a very rare item, right under the top tier legendary. And boring! We could see Barrow's Edge and what it does starting at level 1. And again, I think this is a tribute to Craven Edge from Critical Role. It has a lot of flavor. It's this hungry weapon that wants life force. It does extra damage to their spirit, and it does more damage when they're weakened. It rattles, and it rattles more strongly when an enemy nearby is below half of its health, and you know that it is. You can heal yourself with an enemy's life force with it. Then at level 2, you take the feat Red Gold Mortality. That adds a new passive effect. Whenever you successfully damage an enemy, you create a marking on them, painted in the red of mortal blood and the gold of divine ichor. When they regain hit points for any reason, including an ally's heal spell, they must make a will save to benefit. Then at level 6, because our sword is a slashing weapon, we can take the Motionless Cutter feat. This gives you a Transcendence ability called Sever 4 Dragonfly Wings. If you're surrounded, you get to make a strike against one of those foes, and if it hits, you get to immediately make a strike against a second foe. If that hits, you make a strike at a third foe, and if that hits, you make a strike against a fourth foe, all at your full accuracy. Level 12, Compliant Gold. Your weapon can shrink or grow at your command. You can shrink it to miniature size, tuck it behind your ear, or you can make it abnormally large and extend its reach by 5 feet. If it already was a polearm with a 10-foot reach, it now has a reach of 15 feet. You might have the reactive strike feat, which lets you attack any foe as a reaction who leaves a square within your reach, or do other things like a range attack or cast a spell. You get to even try to disrupt certain actions with this reach weapon. So it gets that passive ability in addition to everything else, and a new Transcendence ability called Topple the Pillar of Heaven. Your sword extends to an impossible length, striking all in its way, doing 68 damage to creatures in a 60-foot line. Level 18, Eternity Incinerating Blaze. You get a new Transcendence ability. I'm just going to read it out loud. The blaze of your divine spark is hot enough that it burns in not just the present, but the past and future as well. Whenever you score a critical hit with the imbued icon, the target becomes doomed 1 or increases its doomed condition by 1. If the target's maximum dying value is reduced to 0 by this ability, it immediately dies in a flash of spiritual fire that reduces its body to ash. This is true even when your icon does not have your spark. And its Transcendence ability is Burn Out of Time. An impossible amount of energy blazes in a sphere above you before compressing itself into your weapon. Strike one creature. This costs 2 actions. The strike deals an additional 3d8 spirit damage and 3d8 void damage. If the creature is reduced to 0 hit points, it's immediately killed and reduced to ash, not in the present, but in the recent past, erasing the consequences of their recent actions. If any creature died within the last round as a result of the incinerated target's actions, that creature is returned to life with 5d8 hit points where it died, and its death is retroactively undone. So you basically have a resurrection effect by manipulating time. What a cool way to give a spell, quote unquote, to a martial character, but it reflects her epicness as a legendary warrior. So that's it. That's my video on the Exemplar. I hope it was a good explanation of the class and gave you a sense of how to play it. My coverage of War of Immortals continues, and we'll conclude with a video on the class archetypes in the new book. To make sure you see that, subscribe and ring the bell. Also, supporting my Patreon gives you access right now to that video, and also early access to most of my videos, and exclusive content. Join my Discord where I hang out a lot. We talk Pathfinder 2e and other gaming, and if you want to play Pathfinder 2e, you can join our drop-in, drop-out organized play program called Endless Tale Tavern. That's it. I've been Ronald the Rules Lawyer. I'll see you next time.